Hello, everyone. This is Vincent of Vincent's Voices. As always, I start the podcast with my Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the Constitution of the United States of America and to the Republic for which the flag stands, one nation under Almighty God, indivisible and with liberty and justice for all. I have a quote, and if you would please, Godfather, there we go. Educate and inform the whole mass of the people. They are the only sure reliance for the preservation of our liberty. Thomas Jefferson. Thank you. You know, folks, you're here at a brand new show, of which I'm going to hopefully start putting in other people. I've been blessed with having Paul Venable, of the chairman of the Constitutional Party here in Missouri. He came on a couple of weeks. If you have the opportunity, you may want to look back and reflect on his interview with me. He was a marvelous man. And he and I got to talking, and he said, you know, Vincent, I know of a gentleman that I really would like for you to meet. And if possible, I think you should interview him. And I said, well, of course I will. And so I've had the opportunity to meet a wonderful host, radio personality. His name is G.R. Mobley. And like the radio, he's going to do the game the way I would have expected, which is we're not going to see him, but he's in the background. And today it is the show, our very first ever, Your Constitutional Truths and Consequences, brought to you by the Paramystic and the production channel, as well as, of course, the Common Denominator Network. So without further ado, hello, G.R. Mobley.
Well, I guess it's good afternoon your time. It's still kind of morning my time, but how you doing?
I am doing quite well. You are with the Red State Radio station, correct, sir?
So I broadcast on Red State Talk Radio, and we're aired in a few different cities. We're aired around the world, but it's primarily streamed for most markets and so forth. We will, and there's some of the, I'll say some of the hosts actually are maybe carried here or there, and that's what we're working at doing as well. But we're actually looking to be broadcast in the very rural areas. We've got a strategy for doing that, but that's down the road. Anyway, the show's name is Reclaiming the Republic on Red State Talk Radio.
Wonderful, sir. Wonderful. Now, you and I had a brief discussion of what this topic for myself is, because it's a very personal situation. I live in a very small community, of which I'll mention in a moment. But we're going to be talking about, or what I like to discuss with you, is taxation without representation.
Uh-huh.
And I'd like to give you an overview of what is going on that I see here at the Lake Viking Association, of the Lake Valkyrie Valley Association here in the state of Missouri, which is about an hour north of Kansas City, for those of you that aren't really kind of familiar with the area of which I'm speaking. We have 1,800 residents / basically homes on this lake. It's 24 miles around, and we also have an additional 1,000 empty lots. And on October 1st of this year, we had an HOA, of which I call the Home Oppressors Association, for which to vote on as to whether we wanted our lot dues to go up or our lot dues to go down. Now, notice the 1,800 residents and 1,000 lot owners. If you put that math together, it's 2,800. And only 75 people voted no for an increase on their lots. And an additional 73 people voted yes. So I believe technically with the numbers that I just gave you, sadly, the other 1,650 people didn't show up, or should I say 2,650 people didn't show up. I would say that it would be wrong for them to circumvent and say the next day in a private meeting, which they did, they passed it anyway in favor of increasing the lots. prices by $250 a year. What are your thoughts on that right at the moment, sir, please?
So let me ask you a couple of questions for background purposes. So have you read the state constitution? And
No,
have you looked in the state constitution for how the state has been delegated the authority for the establishment of other governments in the state? So that's one of the things you want to look for, because what you're dealing with the homeowners association. So it is that it's not a city, it's not a county, it's not a formal governing. It's a governing body, kind of like a corporation. So when you look at how they formed, then they kind of formed this governing body. Now you probably have some covenants, or do they have covenants?
yes,
Is that
sir.
what they are? Oh, okay. All right.
Yes.
So if they've got covenants, then you need to look at the covenants, because the covenants actually establish how this governing body must form. And the covenants should also dictate, or the bylaws should also dictate precisely how they can, how they're to administer the governing process. In other words, do your bylaws allow them to arbitrarily choose to increase the costs, or do they require, a quorum, enough people to vote for or against something? Because many of the problems you're facing, you really need to do that research right there. And then just say that because, excuse me, this is what your state has sanctioned. Now, here's the problem. Many states sanction things that they actually shouldn't be sanctioning. In other words, does the state have that constitutional authority? Which is why I told you, you need to go to your state constitution and go through it with a fine-tooth comb and determine whether they can actually create these types of governing bodies and what these types of governing bodies can do to you.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So for me to, dive into this, then, it's, because HOAs are legitimate, I guess, entities statewide if their governance is within the constitutional framework. Now, they're not, 9 times out of 10, they don't tax. I mean, are they really taxing you?
Our fees for the lots are at this point 2.5 250% higher than our regular property taxes to the county.
Okay, so what you just said is no, they're not taxing you.
Yeah.
They're giving you a fee. They're charging you for the administrative services that they provide, that they've identified that they're going to provide. Now, I guess, I don't know what those things are. This is where the covenants really work into this, because do they have the authority to do the things that they're taking on? Now, 9 times out of 10, they'll have to amend. Let's say, let's say it doesn't snow very much where you live, but let's say you guys have a banner snow year. And one of the things that they needed to do to cover for the services so people could get to work is have the street snow plowed. But that wasn't a part of those association fees. So because they didn't have the money, they couldn't do it. So everybody kind of had to plow for themselves. So the following year, they say, we need to do this and make sure that, we have, access in and out of here if we have snow like this again. So we're going to create let's just call it a snow fund to kind of cover the costs. And we will, I'll just say, add the price appropriately, because it wouldn't be a normal thing that they would have to do a lot of snow plowing in your community, right?
Right.
Okay. So, but my point is that they have a responsibility to interact with the homeowners. This is just a small governing association. And so 9 times out of 10, these types of organizations, homeowners associations, are ran by petty tyrants, and it's all about control for them. And so it's not like they can tax you, but what they can do is they can put a lien against your home and basically say, if you don't pay this, then before you sell your home, you'll have to pay this lien.
Yes.
Now, here's the question: can they actually put a lien against your home and then confiscate your home if you live in that home long enough to where the fees mount up to a point where they feel that they can just take your home? Do you think they could take your home?
I myself have heard that has in fact happened. I have yet to verify that.
Well, so it's not that it hasn't happened, and it's not that they may not try to do it. Constitutionally, they can't.
Okay.
Now, do you have your Constitution with you?
As far as the Constitution,
The Constitution for the United States, do you have that? I'm going to give you time. Go ahead and grab it. And I'm going to ask you to pull up the 14th Amendment when you get it in your hands. Now, just I may not have a camera, but I can see you
yes.
dancing around looking for your Constitution. It would be good to have. As a matter of fact, let's do this before you even open that Constitution up.
Okay.
Go to reclaimingtherepublic.org.
Okay.
Now, I know that we've had problems communicating because your email provider, your ISP that provides you your email services, is basically censoring me because they're using Google guides and parameters, and they do everything they can to keep people from getting emails from me and so forth. I'm just surprised that you can Google Reclaiming the Republic and I would come up high enough, but that I think it's hard for them to suppress everything. But anyway, tell me when you're there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through with you on the Reclaiming the Republic website, where you can get yourself a Constitution that you really should be using instead of the one that you have.
Okay. I'm almost there. Yes, I kid you not. I came home to do the show and I lost everything. Literally.
Uh-huh.
So here we go. Reclaiming the Republic. There is no greater issue facing our republic today than federal tyranny. Is that what I should be looking at, sir?
Yeah, that's the one. Okay, so if you go on the right-hand side, you'll see the very first thing is home, right? The site menu's on the right. There you go. And so the site menu's on the right. The very first thing you'll find is constitutional articles. Well, you'll be able to find a lot of great constitutional articles. You probably find the Constitution there. But if you go down to the first little thing that has the red of YouTube, 2 buttons above that is the Red State Talk Radio podcast. Those are my live podcasts for the year. Okay. And so if you actually go on this page, you can go all the way down and you'll find some documents towards the very bottom. And one of them is the color coded. You need to go way down there.
Oh, yeah, I'm rolling.
Okay, so if you're all the way down at the very bottom, right, you're all the way down and you come up, you're going to find a book. No, go all the way to the bottom of the page.
Oh, you can see what I'm doing.
Yeah. Somebody's actually displaying all this. So you're all the way at the bottom. And then if you just slowly scroll up, you're going to find a book I give everybody. Go ahead and scroll up. Whoever's operating, that's probably your assistant or the producer. Okay, so there's the book. There's a PDF frame right there. I do all my own website, and I know it sucks because it doesn't interface with computers or handheld devices. But this book right here is a book that was written in 1798, and most people need to read this because this is Proofs of a Conspiracy Against All Religions and Governments of Europe by John Robinson. He was in England, and actually, to correct that, it was a conspiracy against all religions and governments of the world. But their first target was Europe, which was the center of Western society, which was dominating the world at the time. Now, if you go up a little bit further, you just scroll up, you'll see another document. And this document is the congressional debates of the 14th Amendment. Now, if you look at the very top corner of that frame, you'll actually see how many pages there are there. There's 263 pages. And so what that means is that these are this is a comprehensive collection of everything that was said about the 14th Amendment in Congress as they debated it for sending off to the states to ratify the amendment. And, there's a lot of stuff we could talk about the 14th Amendment, because I know in your neck of the woods, Kansas and so forth, there are a lot of people that look at this as an unconstitutional amendment, and they're wrong. They've been misinformed about the 14th Amendment. And as a matter of fact, anybody that makes a claim, regardless of what the claim is, ask that person for the evidence. Like some people say that we all became chattel in this amendment, that the 14th Amendment, by creating citizens, actually subjugated us all to the United States to be subjects, no longer citizens. Show me where that is clearly stated as a part of this amendment. Now, one of the things that I have to stop right here. Let me ask you a real quick question, Vincent. What is, and I am I saying that right? Because the Z kind of makes it sound like, or makes it seem similar. Am I wrong?
No, you're okay. It's Vincent.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So what is the Constitution?
The Constitution. Oh my goodness, you just threw me a curve.
No, that's okay. This is as simple as it gets. The Constitution's a compact. It's a compact. In other words, it actually falls under contract law. All compacts that have parties to it, that they agree to do something, that falls under contract law. In other words, the essence and nature of our Constitution is a compact. Is there any evidence of this? Actually, in Article 7, there is. Article 7 clearly states that it requires 13, or out of the 13 states, it required 9 to ratify the Constitution to give it force and validity. And the new federal government would then be formed by these 9 states, and the rest would be history. So Article 7, even though it seems like the least significant part of the Constitution, I tell people that is the most important part of the Constitution people need to understand, because it tells you what the Constitution is, and it tells you who the parties are to it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So why are the parties in a compact so important? Well, it's easy. Because they have the ultimate responsibility and the ultimate say over that compact, which is why that compact in Article 5 only allows the parties to make changes to that compact. In other words, Congress has the power to make a recommendation to say, we'd like to have this amendment, but can Congress actually do something or create an amendment without the state say? In other words, no. It takes 3/4 of the states for the Constitution to be changed. In other words, it clearly points, Article 7 and Article 5 basically are congruent with each other. They dovetail, because Article 7 is basically saying, hey, this is the state's compact, and they have the ultimate say over this.
Gotcha.
And so there's a lot of stuff over time that you need to, and you're going to learn, and it's going to be like the next time, this amount of time we're going to spend. By the time we're done, you're going to be soaked, and you're going to feel like I fire hosed you, because you're going to walk away with so much stuff that you're going to go, I can't remember all of that, but at least you're recording all of this for yourself so that you can listen to it several times. But anyway, so going back to why this debate is important, and why actually at the top of this page, you'll find the ratification debates as the evidence of what the Constitution says. And when you look at a compact, let's just say you and I are going to create a contract because you're going to buy a car. You're coming in to buy a car from me, and I know you're going to pay cash because you told me. I got a blank, up to this amount for a cashier's check to give you a pile of cash here. I'm going to pay in cash. You're going to walk away paid in full. And so I just can't get you to pull the trigger. And so I go, Vincent, let me just say this. If you buy this car that you're oogling at and you buy it today, I will throw in a free car wash for every week that you own that car. Wow. Yeah. So your eyebrows go up and you say, You know what? You got a deal. and you reach across the table, we shake hands, and then I whip out this contract. And actually, we have to have the people prepare it, because it's got to be a contract that identifies that you're going to take ownership of this car, you're going to register it, you're going to have full ownership, and that you're responsible for it. And you're going to do all of these things, because we have to cover our liabilities, because it's always that way. And then boom, you kind of take your car and you go off, and you come back for the first week and you say, I am ready for my car wash, with this smile on your face. And I plant my hand on my forehead and I go, oh, Vincent, we didn't get that into the contract. Hey, next time you buy a car, let's make sure we get that in the contract.
So the verbal contract, of course, is not worth anything.
Well, no, that's not true. We know that the verbal contract still stands today like it did back then. You just have to prove it.
Right. So that would be something where an individual, and I do believe in this personally, I believe that people need to start realizing you could use your phone for more than just standing around watching people doing violent things.
Yes, sir.
At least in our state, we can. Yes.
Yeah, but you need to be aware also of the two-party consent. In other words, you need to make sure that other person knows that you're recording the conversation. That way, you're complying, because there are states that require two-party consent.
And in this state of Missouri, that is the case, that we don't need two-party consent.
That is okay. That's correct. There are just a few states that do require two-party consent. Believe it or not, California, I think, is one state that doesn't require it. But anyway, that's another point. Now we know that the onus is on you to prove that I said that.
Correct.
So you need to either find somebody else that might have heard it, and you probably need two witnesses, right, to stand up in a court of law. But had we wrote that down, then it's a slam dunk, right? It would have been a slam dunk had we wrote that down. Yep. Now let's go back to the website, and I'm going to jerk you around a little bit. We're going to go all the way back to the top of the Red State Talk Radio podcast page. So as your producer pulls up that screen, and as you're looking at it, and you're going to the top of the Red State Talk Radio podcast page, you'll notice that if you just kind of scroll down, I kind of covered this year's content, and you'll notice that I have, I'm kind of, forgive the expression, I'm anal retentive when it comes to getting work done. So I provide the formula, work equals force times distance, right? Because that's how you determine whether you got anything done or not. There's some information up there. And then you'll notice that here are the ratification debates that we covered from 13 March to, and I think it was somewhere in August. So if you scroll down a little bit further down to the next, a little bit further down, and right there you see the top of it. Here are the ratification debates. So what you're looking at this is where the framers, or I should say the delegates elected by the state. So let me give you the big picture. The Constitution was written by delegates that were chosen by the states to go and create amendments to the Articles of Confederation. And they realized that they needed to do more. They were empowered by the, I forget what they call them. It's the Enabling Act of creating amendments or so forth. And I actually have those documents. But bottom line, when you look at these men that went, they were selected by the state legislature. They weren't elected by the people to go create the Constitution. So when the Constitution was done and signed by those delegates who were willing to sign it, because some of them didn't, it went to Continental Congress, and then Continental Congress forwarded it out to each of the states per the instructions at the bottom of the Constitution. And then each state was then required to set up a convention to debate the Constitution and determine whether they would ratify it or not. So when we look at the Constitution becoming a legitimate document, it wasn't voted for by the people in in the true sense of the meaning, a Republican form of government. We, the people, elected delegates out of each of the counties of the state that were existing at the time, the 13 states, and they sent delegates into a state convention to read and debate, and they actually read every line of the Constitution. And there was an argument by the anti-federalists against the federalists as to what this Constitution meant or what this line meant. And so the anti-federalists would use hyperbole and I mean, outrageous assertions. And then the Federalists would come back around and say, no, this is what this line means. Now, let me ask you, getting back to that car sales, what do you think these ratification debates mean today? This is a compact, is it or is it not?
It should be because it's verbal.
No. The Constitution is a compact, correct?
Yes. In fact,
okay. So in each of these debates, as they went through each line of this contract that all states were buying into, then as they wrote that down, they were literally creating the terms and definitions of the contract.
Okay.
This is not insights. These are legal terms, because when you look at the ratification process, the legal definition of a ratification process is the formal process of accepting a compact. So when you are defining what a line means in the contract, like I'm going to throw in a car wash every week you own the car, and that is written in, it becomes a legally appended part of the contract. I could have honored that. I chose not to, because in today's world, it wasn't just my word. It's really hard to go word against word. You have to have it in writing. And I've seen the federal government, because it's in writing in an email, when a contractor comes along and says, oh, this is what this means in an email, they'll use that email for their benefit, because you clearly stated that this thing you sold us was going to do this thing right here, and it didn't. And they will go after them and hold them to the full force of that contract and the penalties involved. Now, we actually have the legally binding terms and definitions of what everything in that Constitution practically means. They did a very good, thorough job in going through this contract. So I just want to impress upon you how important, one, the ratification debates are, but more importantly, as you look at the ratification debates, you have the proponents, those who are for it, and you have those who are against it. Yeah. Now, if they actually voted for it, if the ultimate outcome of that debate in New Jersey or the debate in Virginia ultimately voted for it, that means that the delegates rejected the opponent's comments. So what that means is that their comments are not valid and are not legally binding to the compact. They were rejected. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the whole process. So I try to tell people, be careful of what you're reading, because if you're reading something from George Mason or Patrick Henry in the Virginia ratification debates, these guys were actually doing everything they could to keep the Constitution from being ratified. Now, this gets into, why were they doing all of that and so forth? And it comes down to money, control, ideologies. There were a lot of different independent factors. But nevertheless, in the history of these United States, the governments that have been the culprits to do the worst to we the people, it has been the states.
Because states have their own they have their own implied laws of the land.
Well, so actually they have constitutions. I'll give you a great example. In 2020 and 2021, who was being tyrannical in shutting down the states with COVID? It was the states. It wasn't the federal government coming along, and then Biden all of a sudden jumped in and then started creating these assumptions of mandates and so forth. But the states willingly went along. They willingly subjugated and oppressed their own people.
Yes.
Okay.
That's a good analogy for that too, by the way.
But it was also a good analogy for the Civil War. It was a good analogy for post-Civil War all the way up to the Civil Rights Act. And the reason I'm bringing this up is when you read the 14th Amendment, the majority of the comments probably come from the few people who opposed the 14th Amendment. So when they tell you something, and the reason I'm coming around full circle, there was an assertion by an opponent, not a proponent, a guy that was trying to defeat the 14th Amendment. He made the comment that, oh, this 14th Amendment will subjugate us and we will become subjects to the United States government. And that was refuted. And so the whole point is that when we go through what people are making comments regarding the 14th Amendment, I just want your listeners to understand that they actually need to read these debates and then go prove to me that what they're saying actually exists, because they won't find it. I've gone through it. I have all the pages. And, you know, I have a big character flaw, and I'll just be upfront. I love to be right.
Don't we all?
And you know, the worst, the thing I don't like doing is I don't like eating crow. But you know what? I'm a man of integrity, and if I'm wrong, I'll actually say I'm wrong.
Right.
Okay. All right. So go ahead. Go ahead.
Which is probably, and I'm going to say it like this: people like yourself and myself, we don't mind being wrong when we are. We'll admit it, but we've learned hopefully something new.
Okay. All right.
From
That's fine. Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? It's life is an evolutionary process. And you know what? I was wrong at a very early, you know, I'm wrong a lot. As a matter of fact, I think my wife has got an occasion on the calendar for this year.
That's what I tell my girlfriend too. You can mark the day when I'm wrong.
So getting back, and if you want to scroll back down, if you want to have the producers, if you pull it up and scroll all the way back down to the 14th Amendment again, then we can then move on, because now going up from the 14th Amendment, oh, you just had it. Go back up. You had a bunch of colors. Okay. It stands out. There's the 14th Amendment. Keep going. Go up. There you go. There's that. Now, this is what I want you to download. And as you download this real quick on your computer, Vincent, right, then this way you open it up, you're going to realize that what I did was I went through the Constitution, and Paul Venable and I are going through it. And as he kind of reads this, we're identifying changes to the colors that need to either be added or changed or modified from bad to worse as to how the Constitution is being violated. That's what these colors mean.
Okay.
Now, green does not mean good, so I need to go in and change that to probably either, I don't know, something else. But because orange, red, and yellow are already being used for other things, and some text colors and so forth. But my point is this, is that if the producer downloads this as well, and you save this, then we can actually open this up, and then we can go into, because that's what we're going to do. I'm going to take you into the 14th Amendment. Because the whole thing was we were talking about HOAs, and you wanted to know, and I basically said that an HOA, and I'm going to dive into how limited an HOA really is over your life.
Well, I just found out, for instance, I had an infraction. Well, I had 2 infractions imposed upon me. They said nothing at the board meeting. Basically, what their word was gold, and I was going to pay no matter what. And every month that I didn't pay, they were going to tack on another $30. So I just paid it. And then I went to the county court and I said, I'd like to put in a small claim against the HOA. Notice what I just said, against the HOA. They said, okay, here's your paperwork. When in reality, I took it to the wrong court. I should have taken it to what's called, and I never had heard of this until literally not even a week ago. It was Thursday. I should have taken this, and this is good information for everyone out there listening. If you take an HOA to court, you take them to an associate court. At least that's what I was told by the law firm that I was speaking to about possibly appealing that small claims. He said right there, you can't do anything. He said that was the wrong court to take it to.
Okay, so as now go ahead, now that if you've downloaded the color coded Constitution, you've got it up on your page. what we're going to do is we're going to go to the 14th Amendment. And what you don't have is you don't have the Word document like I do, because I have the navigations all set up with this. But go down to the 14th Amendment, which is at the very top of page 18. So just go to page 18. There you go. That's the 14th Amendment. And you may want to zoom in, because we're going to look at, because right now you have it in the top red section, you have it in yellow. And so if you zoom in a little bit so everybody can see this is the second stanza, the second clause. This is called the immunities and protection, or actually, I'm sorry, immunities and privileges protection clause. In other words, it's the language is pretty clear. So I'll just go ahead and read this. It says, no state, this is post, and this is an amendment to the Constitution. So there's no caveats, there's no exceptions. You'll notice that there's no exceptions here as I read this. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. Do you know what that means? What are privileges and immunities?
Well, it would be your freedoms and liberties, technically.
Well, so no, because the Constitution doesn't deal with all rights. As a matter of fact, in the 9th Amendment, I will actually go there, because this is what it says. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people.
Okay.
So in other words, the Constitution doesn't deal with all of your rights. Like, they didn't think they would need to actually create a Bill of Rights for your right to commerce, or your right to be able to feed yourselves, to grow your own food, or to, produce your own food. I mean, that just defied logic. And when you go through the ratification debates, the one thing you will realize is the Constitution does not provide general powers. It provides enumerated powers. And then there are very specific privileges and immunities that it protects. And that's what the Bill of Rights is. You'll find privileges and immunities mentioned in Article 4 of the basic privileges and immunities and the reciprocity. Let's say you have a license to drive in the state of Missouri at the age of 16, and you drive up to a state that requires you to be 18. Can that state keep you from driving in it?
I would say, okay.
No, they can't. I'm just going to keep you from having to answer that. Yeah. The reason why is because it says right there that the rights that you have in your state are applicable. In other words, you can enjoy them in every state. If you have the right to bear arms in your state or to carry arms, then you can carry those arms into other states. Remember the Ridenour case, or whatever, yes, in the Milwaukee going into Minnesota? Mm-hmm. There was a whole bunch of hoopla about him bringing a gun and being a teenager when in Minnesota. That was illegal. And they actually had a charge with that for him.
Yes.
And that charge didn't hold water because of reciprocity. In other words, he was protected because his state allowed him to do that.
Gotcha.
Okay. So back to the 14th Amendment. So we're bouncing around a bit, and I hope everybody's head isn't spinning too bad. But when we look at privileges and immunities, that means that there are certain protections or certain rights that are protected by the Constitution that no state can make or enforce any law that abridges the privileges or immunities of a citizen of the United States. Now, the 9th Amendment protects our rights, and that is a privilege and immunity, of all these other rights that aren't identified. So the 9th Amendment protects your right of commerce. It protects your right to be able to feed yourself. How many homeowners associations allow people to have chickens to feed themselves?
Yeah, none of them that I'm aware of.
Well, most all of them. There are some. I live in a state that actually does allow. Some may allow it, but 9 times out of 10, that's the first thing they want to take from you. Now, again, nobody ever cried about this until just recently. Why? Because of COVID, because of the supply chains and everything else. We actually had a problem getting chickens and eggs into the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but the whole point of you not being able to have chickens is they're so abundantly available, they're cheap at the grocery store. You just go get them there. Well, what happens if all of a sudden the grocery store can't feed you? All of a sudden, this homeowners association's rights to keep you from being able to feed yourself is legitimate?
Correct.
The fact is, you cannot sign a contract in the United States that will deny you inalienable rights, especially rights, on top of that, especially rights that are literally protected by the Constitution. So here's a good case in point. Can a homeowners association say you're not allowed to have guns in your home?
Actually, there is the homeowners association currently in the news that is trying to do that. And they even went as far as to say, we'd like to enter your house and see all the weapons slash sidearms slash firearms that you have. And the homeowner was kind enough to let them do it. And he never should have done that without them asking for or requiring, in my opinion, a warrant.
Well, so they wouldn't have a right if they. I'm just telling you, the state that a judge in the state that allows somebody to come in and actually deny you a constitutional right, a privilege and immunity that is absolutely guaranteed under the Constitution, such as your right to bear arms. What does it say right here? No state shall make or enforce. So in other words, the homeowner may not be your state. And this is how they've gotten people to do the bidding for progressive, I'll just say progressive agendas that go outside the pale of the Constitution and violate our rights. So in other words, we have governments, or these actually they're not governments, they're non-government organizations that are actually using legislation to oppress us.
Correct.
And they have no constitutional standing. They're basically just a co-op of where people kind of agreed to do, good things, but when they actually cross the line, that contract is null and void.
Well, the Constitution is considered the law of the land, and
it's the supreme law, not just considered the law. Correct. It is the supreme law of the land.
But the thing is, if that is the case, as in, like for myself, one of the 2 infractions I had was in fact dealing with a sidearm. They asked me if I had seen a sign, and I said no, but I know I have seen it, but I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't there to look at the decoration and architecture of the facility I was walking into. I was actually watching my steps. Today I was moving fairly decent. Then all of a sudden, when I got back here, I sat down the wrong way and kinked my back. But that's here or there. What I'm saying is this. There is a Missouri revised statute that says anyone who knowingly goes into a facility which has a sign that says no weapons or weapons prohibited, if they go in there, they can be given a Class B misdemeanor. However, if you have a CCW here in the state of Missouri, you cannot be charged with that Class B misdemeanor. So it's kind of like, where do you go with something like that?
So many states have what we call constitutional carry.
Mm-hmm.
And so Missouri has a constitutional carry then.
Yes.
If you have a constitutional carry, as long as you're not concealing that weapon, you can actually walk in anywhere. Bottom line is, though, that they're actually making laws where they're getting the states to enforce a law that violates the Constitution and your rights.
And that's what happened here.
So, in other words, your lawsuit isn't really against the homeowners association. Your lawsuit is with the state. Because if the state is willing to enforce it, where they actually legitimately impose a penalty, that means that the state is willingly, they've been basically co-opted in doing and supporting tyranny upon the citizens of their state.
Wow. I never even considered that thought. Wow.
And in other words, the state is deliberately enabling these bad actors like homeowners associations to do these things because they know they can't do it.
So the Missouri is a Second Amendment sanctuary, or they consider itself a Second Amendment sanctuary state. You know, the word sanctuary, they like to play with words. I'm sorry, but the legislation seems to like to play with words.
Right.
So if you are a Second Amendment sanctuary state, I was really assuming when I went into small claims that I had this licked and I was going to get my money back, that they took it wrongfully because, again, I am an American citizen. I am a citizen in the state of Missouri. We are a Second Amendment sanctuary state, and yet the court still said can't do it.
Well, so here's the thing. There's a lawyer that Paul Venable knows, and he makes a living out of protecting your rights and going after the state and or governments for violating your rights. And what has happened is your HOA has created a rule that your state is actually willing to support or enforce, which violates your 14th Amendment right.
And the thing is also, if I were to go to an associate, like if I were to say, all right, I'm going to go to the associate court and now refile this, the attorney for their side would come up with the res judicata. It's called res judicata, would be able to say, nope, it's kind of like a double indemnity or a double jeopardy. You can't bring the case to trial in a different court again. So I'm kind of screwed on that, is what I've been told. But however, I could put my name on a petition that's
hold on. You're actually just fighting the HOA.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, sir. I was attempting
so when you walked into the court, you weren't fighting the state. You weren't going after the state for allowing an entity to create a rule or law that forces them to enforce it.
Henceforth, what I should have done was go to, again, an associate court. And I'm not familiar with that at all.
No. You actually need to go to a county court with a lawsuit, and actually the county court would probably defer you or remand you to just go straight into the state court. I don't know where that would be. Probably, what is it, Jefferson? And you just basically you need to get talk to Paul Venable about the lawyer, and he'll tell you what court would be appropriate to start off with, whether you start straight off at the state Supreme Court, because this is a constitutional right that you've been denied.
Yes. And I've been punished for it. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And I feel I've got a lot of fervor for this because, again, that's me. This is happening to me. I mean, I know me, and I'm not that bad guy. And I'm sure you understand what I mean by that.
Well, so one of the things that I'm doing, and I'll let your producer now that we've gotten past this, I'll allow if your producer would mind, I'd allow him, if he wouldn't mind going back to Reclaiming the Republic. So you don't need me, you just need the document. So go back to Reclaiming the Republic and go to the top of the website, at the top of the page, and you'll notice in the site menu, if you scroll down, 2 buttons underneath the YouTube button, because see, I have videos out there that actually teach people, very specific points that they need to understand regarding the Constitution. But you'll notice that there's this petitions page. Mm-hmm. If you click on the petitions page, it'll take you to our current petitions. Now, when I say petitions, let me just ask you, you can keep the page up there and we'll just talk back and forth. What is a petition, or what is a First Amendment petition? Because I kind of play it out here. These are First Amendment petitions. So what's a First Amendment petition?
To allow people to basically vote on a topic or a situation.
No.
Okay.
No, a First Amendment petition in accordance with the First Amendment is that the right of the people to petition government for the redress of grievances shall not be abridged.
Hang on a second. I'm taking a shower.
So when most people think of petitions today, we have been inculcated or indoctrinated into thinking that petitions are things that either you go into court with, you petition the court, or it's a petition for an initiative to vote here, this way, that. No, a First Amendment petition is a right that we, the people, possess to actually hold our public servants accountable. So now let's back out to the Constitution and learn another nice, very important connect the dots lesson. No, you can keep that there. We'll just keep it on the First Amendment petition. You can keep it on the website. I'm sorry. But kudos to your producer. So
he's wonderful.
So in Article 6 of the Constitution, it is required, it's right there in Section 2, it is required that every public servant, state and federal, have to take an oath of office.
Mm-hmm.
And that, they're not allowed to take any religious test, but they are required to take an oath of office. And they're required to support one and one thing only. What is the one thing that a politician has to support?
I want to go out on a limb and say it would be supporting the will of the people.
The constituents. See, that's what most people think. Hey, you have to support me. No, they're legally bound to support the Constitution. When they're supporting the Constitution and living up to their oath and ensuring that that thing is followed by letter, then your liberties are secure. When they actually do what you want and hand you money or give you Obamacare and do all of these other things, they're getting away with tyranny.
Gotcha.
So we have this legal, here's the first dot. In the Constitution, for the first time ever on the globe and in the annals of mankind, did we create a requirement to legally bind our servants, whether they be judges or officers of the court or even bureaucrats. As a matter of fact, let me just emphasize something here. When Congress formed and they started getting organized to doing things, they probably had a punch list, right? They probably had, we got to do this, we got to come up with pay. How are we going to pay ourselves? What are we going to do? What was the first act that they actually created and passed? Now, you won't know this, but I'm going to tell you, it was the regulations and the administration of the administering of the oath. In other words, what they thought was the most important thing was how they were going to ensure that everybody was legally bound to that oath.
Would that be one of the reasons why it seems like a vast majority of our politicians that are in office, a vast majority, all are lawyers that are creating laws that actually technically protect themselves while they're in office?
And they can't do that either, but that's a different story. Okay. So, and actually, Paul Venable and I kind of talk about this on tomorrow's show regarding the 13th Amendment, the Nobility Clause or the Nobility Amendment. Anyway, the point is that the first dot is that they are now legally bound that they must support the Constitution. So we basically were at that point in time, and based on the Constitution, we were kind of reliant upon the honor and integrity of our servants to basically fulfill that oath until the First Amendment came along, and we actually had it galvanized in the Constitution that if they don't abide by the Constitution and they do things that they shouldn't be doing, we now have the right to petition them for the redress of grievances. Now, the First Amendment right of petition is a whole gamut, and I'm writing a big article on this. But the fact is this is how we hold their feet to the fire. The problem is in the Constitution and in the Bill of Rights or in the amendment at that point in time, there was no vehicle or mechanism of holding our public servants accountable to that. I mean, other than we petitioned them and we hoped that they would do the honorable thing. It wasn't until the 14th Amendment, Section 3, where we actually got the third dot that closed the loop. Now they're legally bound. Now we can actually petition them and call them out and hold them accountable. And if they fail to do what they're supposed to do, and we prove that they have violated their oath of office in that petition, then Section 3 of the 14th Amendment must kick in and they must be removed immediately for violating their oath, because that's what Section 3 basically says. Anybody, the only people it doesn't include is the president and the vice president, but everybody else is fair game. While under oath, while serving in office, if you fail to support the Constitution and or actually support others who are violating it or outright violate it, then you are immediately ineligible to be in office and must be removed. In other words, you're not sent to jail. You're not committing a crime. You've just lost your eligibility because you've perjured yourself regarding that legal binding oath that you're being held to. So it's connecting those dots. And it was Senator Howard of Michigan. As I told you, I've read those debates. It was Senator Howard of Michigan that basically helped connect that. He says anybody that takes an oath and knowingly has that oath and they actually do something that violates that oath, then they've, in essence, perjured themselves and, morally perjured themselves at a minimum. And he's absolutely right. They have perjured themselves. And so that's why Section 3, migrated from just punishing the South to actually ensuring and protecting we, the people, from our public servants from ever insurrecting against the Constitution again. Now, I'm going to tell you that the South didn't insurrect against the Constitution. But bottom line, that's what the whole point of Section 3 is. They can no longer get away with doing anything that violates the Constitution. Okay, so now we understand the petitions, and these are First Amendment petitions. So this is that middle part. These are legal arguments that dictate what should have happened, what you did, and what and how that what you did was wrong, and this is what you got to do to fix it. And if you don't, you need to step down immediately. Mm-hmm. And so if the producer would scroll down and you kind of look at some of these petitions, I'll go through these. And the reason I'm bringing this up is you have a petition in you. Okay, so petition 1 is the redress of violations of the 12th Amendment. And this basically right here removes Biden immediately. Biden was unconstitutionally seated, and this argument right here proves it. And we go into the details. Go ahead.
Yeah, I had actually said that at the time of the election. This was
no, but this is over matters that you haven't even talked about. But nevertheless, because there's a whole legal case behind this of how the Electoral College was illegitimate. We had an illegitimately formed Electoral College, and this dives into that. No, but this is not about election fraud. This is about a violation of the Constitution. This is only 10 pages. Some of these petitions are pretty deep and pretty long, but this one right here is pretty simple because we actually point to, I think, a 60-page legal lawsuit against Congress. The next petition is regarding the treaties with foreign sovereignties that are all unconstitutional, whether they be Indian tribes, which aren't foreign sovereignties anymore, or our involvement in the UN or NATO and all of these alliances and ties via treaty. This right here goes through, it's 16 pages, and it goes through the constitutionality, or actually the unconstitutionality, of using a treaty over something that the federal government has no authority to do. If you read the Supremacy Clause in Article 6, the United States Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and treaties which are made or shall be made under their authority. In other words, they have to have the constitutional authority enumerated to them to give them the ability to create a treaty to subjugate us to a foreign nation. There's nowhere in our Constitution that allows the federal government to subjugate us or the states to a foreign nation. And so this clearly states that our involvement and all the money that we've given the UN and all of these other nations is unconstitutional. So going down to the next one, I mean, all of these are I'm telling you, in-depth lessons. And so the next one is the violations against the guarantee clause. This talks about the invasion on our southern border and how everybody in Congress and everybody at the state legislature, they're all violating their oath of office because the Constitution guarantees in Article 4, Section 4, it states that the United States guarantees to each state or to every state in the Union a Republican form of government and shall protect each from an invasion. They're not protecting us from an invasion. They're actually misclassifying it as a crisis or an immigration, problem or what have you. It's not. It's an invasion by definition. And the Constitution clearly states in Article 1, Section 8 that the Congress shall have the power to call forth the militia, to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. So the Constitution says exactly what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to repel it. They're supposed to stop it, grab all these people, and get them out of here.
Right.
That's constitutionally, that's what they have to do. And nobody is calling for it. So that's that. The fourth petition actually is something very similar to what you're doing, that this could possibly be modeled after an HOA. And we can get into this a little bit later, but this basically goes after any like Walmart, or if you try to do petitions and get signatures at a Walmart or someplace, and they say you have no right to be here, then this petition gives you the language that they cannot create a law that forces the state to enforce. And so, in other words, they're getting the state to violate the 14th Amendment. The next one is a petition that can remove a governor over this is specific over the last pandemic, where any governor that actually shut you down, shut your state down. This is when you read these things, you'll notice the red text. The red text is what all you have to do is change that to your governor, to your state, to your county, to your city, or what have you, and voila. You can practice. This one takes a little bit more editing and changing, but for the most part, all of these petitions, this is a repository. So anybody in any county, in any state, can take these petitions, change them quickly, and then go down, get signatures for these, and go down to their county commissioners and start petitioning and start demanding compliance to the Constitution. Petition 6 is violations of the Constitution by the federal government in operating the Department of Transportation. A long, good story. It's 24 pages, but this gets into the details of how operating the Department of Transportation absolutely and unequivocally violates the Constitution. The 7th petition, this one right here covers gold and silver coin, the requirement that only states can allow gold and silver coin to be the currency in the state, and that allowing digital currency, paper currency, electronic currency is unconstitutional. So this was a petition that we used in South Dakota to actually go after the state legislature who passed a digital currency. And what we ended up doing is we did this petition and said, we're seeking your removal because you already allowed this to happen. It's gone to the governor. And so what now we have is that when the governor vetoed it and it came back, they actually repealed. So we're just going after those who still voted for it, because if you're voting for something that violates the Constitution, you violated your oath.
Right.
And so this is a 26 page. So you'll notice that some of these are pretty long. The next one is violations of legislative authority. In other words, this one right here goes after the court. This basically says that the court and executives, like the governors and the president, cannot use anything for legislative authority, such as executive orders, court rulings, what have you. They cannot create law. The Constitution prohibits anybody other than Congress. It says legislative authority is vested in the Congress, not anybody else. And so when we actually get the court to, homosexual marriage and so I'll get into all of these. The reason why we created these is because most of these petitions are integral in supporting other petitions, because these are the groundwork, like the Department of Transportation. These lay the groundwork so that you can actually reference these petitions in later petitions, and I'll show you how. In this next petition, this is the petition that violations of the Constitution for the United States of America by the federal and state governments and medical establishments. What this petition does, and if you notice in the very top of this, you kind of see these references. Reference A is the Department of Transportation. Reference B is the treaties and the agreements with foreign nations or doing treaties outside of the powers granted in the Constitution. And then the other one, 8, is the one of allowing the court to create law. They can't. And so we use these petitions to actually support this legal argument, this constitutional argument that creating in any way anything that governs the matters of health, healthcare, life, or those types of things, or medicine and disease are all unconstitutional. There is no power delegated to the federal government to be able to do any of these things. And therefore, this is a 40-page petition, but it really expands. Now, this petition lays the groundwork for other petitions. But the whole point is, and this is kind of, I don't want to say this is the life of my work, but this is the work that we have accumulated, because this petition right here actually was, assisted by a team in Virginia. And we've got, I've got the 10th petition that just came from Paul, regarding the ability for the federal government to allow foreign investment of land. In other words, to buy up American resources. They have no authority to do that. And yet we see China buying everything up. We see all sorts of foreigners buying up businesses and everything else, and they can't. There's no constitutional authority to allow all of this. It's all being done in fraud.
And that's the whole thing. All of this is being done for, and I'm going to say it like this, and maybe I'm wrong. So far I haven't, and I like that. I'm okay with that. It helps people realize that we make mistakes and learn. But it makes me feel as though they're doing it really for just their own personal gains. A lot of these politicians that are in office, they want to, and the American people are beginning to see it, I believe, and they just feel like they're being taken advantage of, that they're being abused. In my case, I'm sorry, I have to say it like this. I know what I've done, and you can rest assured, an infraction for, and I know I drive a little bit, what one might say careless, but in this case here, I'm driving my girlfriend's vehicle, and I've got to tell you, way I drive my vehicle, my friend's vehicle is totally different. And these people, of course, lied and made up their own little situation. And again, what they say is the law of the land of which I live in. And I feel like at this point, I live in a communist community. I don't feel like I live in America, the land of the free.
Well, let me ask you this. Now, you were assigned a fee for your gun. In other words, they came along and said, we've given you an infraction, and now you have to pay this fee.
Yes.
Now, let me ask you this. Were you offered due process?
No.
In other words, did they go and prove a case? Because bottom line, you're innocent until proven guilty. Is that not correct? I mean, I don't know. I might be wrong.
Yeah, I should be considered that. But again, I did walk in. They took a picture. I had it exposed in a holster.
Okay, but did they ask you for a CCW? Did they ask you on what grounds are you carrying? In other words, what they're doing is, it seems to me like they actually shot down, or they, quickly went down a path of getting money.
Yep.
In other words, oh, well, we've got a picture. We can prove our case, but the case is not proven until it's done where?
In a court of law.
In a court of law, where you have an opportunity to face your accused. These are constitutional rights.
Yes, and I did not get and I was not allowed to face my accuser in the first infraction.
So okay. So what you're talking about is another 14th Amendment right, which is a different issue, where they violated your right of actually due process, facing your accuser, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so now you actually can sue in this association for your constitutional rights. You put the issues aside themselves. They don't have the ability to just rubber stamp a fee, send it off for collections. And if it's a Class B misdemeanor, that means it's a crime that they can charge you with. But that charge doesn't stand until proven in a court of law. Okay? Yep. It's the same thing, it sounds like, with these other issues. So you have 3 counts or 2 counts against them where you've actually proven that they have no care to actually, and you know what? The courts don't want this either. The courts, this is all a scheme to allow your HOA to ingratiate themselves with money, and it keeps the courts from having to deal with the penny ante stuff, because bottom line, they know that if this all came into the court, that the homeowners association would bleed themselves dry quickly in trying to, pursue the prosecution of these cases.
Gotcha.
Because who's going to pay for it? The court's going to say, well, we're not going to pay for it. You guys are creating these laws. You have to have your own court. And you know what? They don't have their own court.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a good question for you. What is constitutional law?
I'm blank on that. I'm blank.
That's okay. That's okay. What is Verizon law?
Okay. I imagine it has nothing to do with a cell phone.
Okay. These are concocted laws based upon a contract. Have you ever heard of Verizon law? No, but that we know of Verizon contracts. So if Verizon went along and they started creating all of these different laws of enforcing their contract, such as creating agencies and fines and fees, you said this word or what have you, then that would be considered Verizon law.
Okay.
Constitutional law is basically a highfalutin way of saying, oh, well, we're creating laws in pursuance to the Constitution. I told you at the very beginning, the Constitution is a contract and it falls under contract law.
A social contract.
Not a social contract, legitimately contract. So when the Supreme Court actually convenes a court, the first thing they have to do is they have to determine, do they have jurisdiction? Right there in Article 3, it states, and I think it's Section 2, that the jurisdiction of this court is to all things in law and equity arising under this Constitution. So when it comes to life and abortion, is that arising under this Constitution?
No.
No, not at all. So how is it that the court opened their doors to something that didn't arise under the Constitution?
Well, we know the Supreme Court overstepped their boundaries, even when you're looking at the differences of the elected or the selected. Let me rephrase it: the selected by the president's Supreme Court justice. Even Ruth Bader had said that the Roe versus Wade should not be there. That really kicked the Democrats in their tail, by the way.
Well, but it was either last year, I think it was 2 years ago, maybe, whenever the court actually overturned Roe v. Wade, what they said was we had no jurisdiction.
Right.
Okay. So they admitted to the fact that they opened the door to something that they had no authority to even hear. And then they made a ruling. How many kids were legitimately died under the name and the edict of an unconstitutional law from the Supreme Court?
Hundreds of thousands, millions, perhaps.
Millions. We're easily in the millions. Yeah, millions. And so it goes down the same thing with healthcare. And when you read that petition, you will realize that the courts have literally redefined what something means in the Constitution to help stretch and twist the law to fit what the government wants to do. And when you read the Constitution, they don't have any authority to do that. They can only try the cases on, on fact, on law and fact. Mm-hmm. They can't redefine. Every time the court redefines something, whether it be marriage, whether it be oxygen or CO2, they have instantly, transformed themselves into a power and authority that does not exist within that Constitution. Now, remember, I gave you a copy of the color-coded Constitution. When Paul and I went through this, we started at Article 1 and we just went all the way through. And each time we were pointing out, okay, this is being violated. Now, when you start seeing, it's one thing, most people, when they read the Constitution, because it's not identified to you that this is being violated, you just read it and accept it. But now when you read a color-coded Constitution, you're actually looking at that and going, oh my gosh, this is something that's being violated. Now, you brought up a point that actually, comes up in the very beginning of the Constitution about taxation without representation, right? I mean, that was the most important factor of our revolution. How many people are supposed to be represented in Congress by one representative?
Well, the amount.
Excuse me for good producer, sir. Would you please pull up the color-coded Constitution and let's go to the first page. Now, he's already ready to go. This is great. So, if you actually go down to the bottom of Article 1, Section 1, it'll actually, I think it's Article 1. Oh, it's Article 1, Section 2. And you'll see that it's the red area with yellow text. Do you see that? Now you need to pull it up so you can read that, because you're going to answer the question just by reading that one little section, because this will tell you how many people are supposed to be represented by one representative in the House of Representatives.
It says the age.
No, it says the number. It's in the red with the yellow text. It says the number of representatives shall not exceed. Do you see that?
Yeah, one for every 30,000, but each state shall have at least one representative, and limit such enumeration shall be made.
Until such enumeration shall be made. In other words, if you notice that they actually kind of lay out the enumeration of how many each state gets after this. It says the state of New Hampshire shall be entitled to choose 3, Massachusetts 8, Rhode Island, Providence, Plantations, and Connecticut are 1, and Connecticut 5. So they go through and set out how many representatives each state will get, and then they identify that in the 1790 census, they will then readjust based on that number of one representative for every 30,000 citizens. Now, there was some, I don't want to say shenanigans. They were trying to figure out what that 30,000 was. Was that 30,000 voters, 30,000 citizens? Did that include slaves and children and so forth? And so, to me, I don't care. Mm-hmm. What really matters is the fact of when we look at that number, 30,000, it was 40,000 before the Constitution was sent for final print. George Washington, very rarely makes comments during the Constitutional Convention. And this was one of the times, just getting ready to go to print, Washington stopped everybody and says, look, I really don't want to say anything, but I have a problem with this 40,000. And everybody kind of, huh? Because they danced around from 30 up to 50 and they settled on 40. And so Washington basically says, I cannot fathom how a person could be represented when they're competing with 40,000 people for one person to represent them. It's one thing to give somebody a power of attorney, and actually I'll get into the Constitution powers of attorney right after this, but it's one thing to give a person the power of attorney because they can directly represent you, but your representative is basically somebody you're granting power of attorney to govern in your behalf. You're giving them your suffrage in the House of Representatives to vote in representing you. And so how is it that they can truly represent people greater than 30 or 40 or even 50,000?
Right.
Today, it's almost 1 million.
Yeah.
Okay. So the point is, the Constitution's clear. It says 30,000. So one would think that there is an amendment that actually changes the apportionment from 30,000 to something else, right?
Right.
And there is. So if you go to, and I'm going to tell you what page to go to. If you go to, let me see here, it's be the Bill of Rights at the very top of that. This is on page 13, and then you'll see the Bill of Rights. Now it's colored in green, but technically it should be something else because it's not good. People see green and they think it's good, so I need to change the color. But I'm going to read this amendment to you, and the author of this, actually all of the states requested this amendment. They wanted to ensure that there was a very laid out path of changing that number at the very beginning because they knew down the road it may be hard or they would be ignored. And they wanted to make sure that people were cognizant in protecting their representation, their power of attorney that they're giving to this one dolt that represents them in the House of Representatives. And so this is what it says. After the first enumeration, in other words, what was in the Constitution in the first article, there shall be one representative for every 30,000 until the number shall amount to 100. In other words, once the Chamber of Representatives grows to 100 representatives, after which the proportion shall be so regulated by Congress that there shall be not less than 100 representatives, nor less than one representative for every 40,000. So in other words, once they hit 100 representatives in Congress, then it would go to 40,000. This would help slow the growth rate in filling up the seats. And then it would go and shall amount to 200 after the proportion shall so regulate by Congress that there shall not be less than 200 representatives nor more than a representative for every 50,000. So in other words, they created an amendment in the Bill of Rights that would have actually locked down the transition from 30,000 to 40 once it got to 100, and then from 40 to 50 once it got to 200, and capped at 50. Currently, the Constitution is capped at 30. So where in the heck did Congress actually get the authority to change that number when the framers, the guys that actually wrote the Constitution, said we need an amendment to make that change?
Right.
What I'm giving you here is when we actually look at amendments that were suggested and have not passed, we can learn that, oh, that's something that actually requires an amendment. Why would the framers just say, oh, well, just use statute and just make it up as you go along? No, everything in this Constitution was written in granite, and the only way it can change is you got to get the states to buy into it. So this is the very first amendment, but it was never ratified. And so when you go through this color-coded Constitution, you're going to actually see amendments like this that were proposed that were never ratified. Like in 1926, they tried to pass an amendment to allow the federal government to regulate labor. You know, this thing called the Department of Labor and all these labor laws?
Right.
They asked the states to give them that authority, and the states rejected it. So how is it that we have the Department of Labor, or the same thing with the Department of, Transportation? And I'm not going to ruin that story. We have a 7-minute video on Reclaiming the Republic YouTube page. It's worth watching. You'll hear my voice, but I go through the details, the academic details of how the federal government has no authority and actually cite the 3 presidents that vetoed the first early congressional attempts in actually creating that power. Now, going back to this concept of a power of attorney, when you look at our Constitution, when I told you that it was an enumerated Constitution, there were no general powers. Every role, responsibility, power, and even property was listed in this Constitution, and these are the only things that they can do. These are the only pieces of property they can possess. There's nowhere in that Constitution that grants the federal government the power or property to possess a Indian reservation, a forest, an environmental protected field, or, protecting for species. They don't have those authorities. The states must delegate that to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, go ahead.
And that's why, if I'm not mistaken, that's why a lot of states, for instance, I'll just go with the conservation, they have their own Department of Natural Resources or their own Department of Conservations.
Yeah, but many states actually, and the farther west you go, the more states that don't even possess their own land.
Because it's owned technically by the federal government, which, if I'm not mistaken, was
unconstitutionally, not technically, unconstitutionally.
Unconstitutionally, but that would have been done, if I'm not mistaken, by Theodore Roosevelt for the better part.
No. So actually,
he did try to salvage the grounds for that.
Actually, so let me go to the state order, because it happened with Indiana where they started playing with these shenanigans. And so when Indiana became a state in 1816, they actually went into their enabling act and they told this new forming government that they had 12 salt mines that Congress felt were national resources that needed to be protected. So they advised the state, they didn't tell the state, but they advised the state that they, should not sell that land, that they should lease it so that they can maintain and protect this valuable national resource, because salt was how we preserve food. I mean, salt was really critical to life back then. Sure. As we move forward, and as a matter of fact, you know what? I'm going to go back to the color-coded Constitution again. And I'm going to go to where is it? It is on the page, on the very bottom of page 15. Here's an amendment that we can learn from Thomas Jefferson. You had it. It was all there in green, and it's not good. But if you go back to that, there you go, right there.
Article 7. So
Thomas Jefferson actually suggested a amendment to the Constitution in 1803. Well, why? Well, he actually got all of this land as the Louisiana Purchase. And if you read this amendment, it exposes the powers that the federal government doesn't possess, because he's asking for the federal government to be able to grant the Indians property, because that's what they're saying in here. But not only that, there's also talking about soil in here. And so let me just do a quick search, because I'll just put the word up here because I can do that and you can't. Soil, S-O-I-L, S-O-I-L. All right. So right there in the second line, and if I'll just read the very beginning of this, the province of Louisiana is incorporated with the United States and made part thereof. The rights of the occupancy in the soil and of self-government are confirmed to the Indian inhabitants as they now exist preempted. In other words, he wants to grant these lands, and he's also, because this is the first time this ever comes up, mineral rights, soil rights. And he actually goes through this a little bit further down and talks about the metals in the next part in this. And I'll jump down to this. He says, not being Indian inhabitants, so he's talking about in the areas that they want to work salt mines or mines of coal, metal, and other minerals within the possession of the United States. In other words, he wanted to assume mineral rights for the United States as well. What does that tell you?
Tells you that he's taken the land from the Indians.
Well, no, actually, if you read this, he's giving them a whole bunch of land, but there's going to be certain land that he will take for the minerals and the things that we can actually use, but he wants to give them all of this land. And here's the thing. If he's asking for something, that means that it doesn't exist in the Constitution. My point is that right here, as they're talking about mineral rights belonging to the United States, that means it doesn't exist in the Constitution, that it was never delegated to the federal government to possess and own mineral rights, which means that the states, each state, if the states don't have it in their Constitution, then even they can't have those mineral rights. Now, I'm here to tell you that we want to make sure that our mineral rights are protected by government and not sold out from underneath us or sold to exploit or what have you. But here I'm telling you, this is one of the problems we have with our constitutional framework, because many times when you start out the gate, you start realizing, well, I have the keys and I got the tires and the car's going, but we don't have windows. And boy, it sure would be nice when it rains to have windows. And so to get the windows, you have to amend the Constitution. You got to get the authority from the parties. But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
The question that was just asked by the Godfather was, how does this apply, for instance, like to eminent domain?
What's that? I'm sorry.
How would it possibly be applied to eminent domain?
Well, so if you're talking about the Godfather is Thomas Jefferson.
No, this would be Don Corleone over in comments. He was just asking, how does this apply to the eminent domain?
Okay. So you got to understand that the framers and Thomas Jefferson's philosophy was the land belongs to the living. And that, for people to buy and keep land from being able to benefit those who are alive today is not a good thing. And actually, if you actually do the research on this, it comes out to this, interesting word, Obschufrucht or something like that. And that's, I believe, how it's kind of pronounced. I'm not really good at pronouncing, but look it up. And it is a theory of Thomas Jefferson's that we needed to do something to ensure that what we're dealing with today doesn't happen, where Bill Gates and other people that can easily come in and buy up land at no real penalty to them and get away with actually executing economic warfare. Mm-hmm. The framers back in their day, they never thought that there would be this league, an army of people with such riches that they could actually affect and impact states, sovereign states, with economic warfare. And it all started technically with the states.
Yes, it did.
Because when the states back up. When the federal government started operating what we call subsidies, they were actually igniting economic warfare in the states, and the states let them. Now, if your good producer would go to all the way up to the top of the page, we're getting off the petitions page now, and we're going to go to the constitutional articles page. And if he goes down about halfway, I believe it's about halfway, we'll get to a little subtitle that says the Constitutional Minutes, 2023 Constitutional Minutes. So if you actually just did a Control F and you search for 2023 con, it'll probably take you right to that. But keep going down. All of these articles are must read for everybody, but you keep going down. There you go, right there. So this very top article, go back up. A little quick there. I'm sorry, it's probably the delay. Slowly keep going up. And the dog you hear barking is not being harmed in any way. Go back up. You had it right there. It's the Constitutional Minutes for the week of 23 January. So you're going the wrong way. Yeah, there you go. Go down right there. So when I say up, I mean bring the bottom up. So my bad. I was wrong and I'm sorry. Inside this article, these are articles that I send to state legislators. I poke them in the eye and tell them, the blood is on your hands. Now, technically, the blood is on our hands, and I'll get to that because we've got to wrap up here really quick. If you look at the red text in this article, I go through at a high level the type of warfare tactics that our government has been exercising against we the people for decades. And when I say warfare, see, most people think, the combatant and conventional warfare, tanks, guns. No. Chemical warfare, misinformation. There's all different forms of warfare. As a matter of fact, it's around 30 some odd, I think. And I get into it right here and I help people start redefining what is economic warfare. And there's a whole lot of economic warfare. There's chemical warfare. You can't tell me that crap that they're spraying overhead is for our benefit. As a matter of fact, this is why we're finding heavy metals in our drinking water and in the foods we eat and everything else, because they're bombarding us with chemicals. Yep. That's warfare that our government, or I should say, and I believe it's our government that's paying for it. And the sad thing is you go down to your state house and say, tell me what is being dropped on us. And they say, oh, well, that's just contrails. Then this is where you slap them upside the head and say, oh, excuse me, but what part of physics changed around that aircraft at that point in time to where a contrail actually took form of a cloud instead of actually dissipating like a contrail should? Because physics only allows a contrail to exist for just a matter of seconds.
Yep.
So what you're telling me, I'm not buying because physics doesn't sell it. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, I can be mean sometimes, and that's the Marine in me. But if you go through this one article right here, I lay the argument out, and I get these things out to the state legislatures that I have email addresses, or I forward them to other people to make sure that their legislators get these. I've been doing this for a long time. I do understand the Constitution. I don't want to say I'm the authority, but I'll tell you what, you'll be hard pressed to find anybody that understands the Constitution anymore, because they don't read the ratification debates. And I invite people to get smart and become constitutional warriors by reading. So we, in our radio, Red State Talk Radio podcast, if you go through I think it started in March, Paul and I read, and we actually highlighted what we read. So you can read along with us and hear the discussions, come up with the questions yourself. But 9 times out of 10, we cover most of it. And by the end of that curriculum, you will understand the Constitution better than a constitutional lawyer.
I'm gonna just say first and foremost, GR, thank you for this almost 2 hours. I mean that. Thank you. I believe a lot of people are going to benefit. There's no doubt. And I'm going to say this to you. I am going to be watching this several times over again. I always like being, and I don't mind being, I always say the stupidest person in the room. And the reason for that is because sometimes being in that position, it not only allows me perhaps, hopefully, to learn something, but in that framework of how I think, it may say someone, oh, that guy said this, and it was completely wrong, but that's why I remember it. So yeah. I want to thank you so very, very much. I'm hoping that this will, of course, not be the last moment or the last time that we'll have this. And who knows, maybe I could get yourself and Paul on here at the same time. That would be an interesting program as well. And I know you have to wind up. Is there anything? I have one quick question. We've got about 3 minutes. You can maybe answer this. In this little microcosm of a community of which I live, because you're talking about petitioning through the county commissioners and stuff like that, but in this little microcosm of what I live, do you feel like a petition that would be signed off by the residents and the lot owners themselves could possibly, in the long run, perhaps, remove the HOA, making it an unincorporated town or a village? Do you think the petition would be worth trying to do?
Well, so
Because I've had that brought to my attention.
So that begs another conversation because it's not something I could actually answer. I believe that what we need today is we need a movement. We need people to demand full compliance with the Constitution. I tell people that these guys over here that are fighting for the Second Amendment, they're a part of the problem. Because if you're not a part of the solution, you are a part of the problem. How do you become a part of the solution? You have to demand full compliance. If you're asking to comply with one part of the Constitution, you're telling people to turn their back on the rest of it.
Correct.
And that to me is the biggest problem we have. United we stand, divided we're conquered. And everybody that says, no, chase this artifact, chase this thing, whether it be medical freedom, whether it be education, whether it be the Second Amendment, I don't care. You pick your little myopic issue and you become a divisive little tyrant out there trying and helping us get conquered.
Yes. Yep.
So we all have to start, and that's why we have a repository on all different petitions. So where we need you to go is we need you to get smart in understanding the Constitution, getting educated so that you can write your first petition, and it could be taking down the HOA, but you're not done. We have well over 100. I've got a table of tyranny, and every single color on that Constitution means that that's at least one petition. That little colored area in this part of the Constitution, that's a petition. Mm-hmm. So we have hundreds of petitions to do. And, even though you may not see it in the Constitution, like the Department of Energy, the Department of Labor, every single power that's been assumed unconstitutionally is a petition, like the Department of Transportation. That's why we did that one. And so everything that comes out of the court to create law is a petition, which is why we created that one. We need to do one on an EOs. But my point is, as we lay the foundation, we can easily start moving forward, and we can all I'm trying to create irrelevance to all of these different organizations. Just imagine this. If the people that spent billions of dollars on stopping abortion and the National Rifle Association and all these myopic issues, if they would have all pulled their resources together and said, we want full compliance with the Constitution, it would have eradicated the party system. It would have gotten us all in line with the Constitution, and we wouldn't be in this peril that we're today. So don't tell me that these guys, have it out for, they have our best interest in their hearts. They don't. No. They're even the conservative entertainers out there are out there making money, and they know that if they solve the problem, they're a part of the solution. They killed the goose that's laying their golden egg.
Yeah.
So we all have to unite, and there's nobody that can refute what I'm saying. And it's only because I've been poked in the eye and I've gotten it right finally.
GR, I thank you. Thank you for your time. A question was asked because you did mention Paul's name. I've met Paul. In fact, he came up here. He was gracious enough to drive from what normally would have been about 2.5, 3 hour drive. It was like almost a 3.5, 4 hour drive. Yeah. And then he spent the night at my home, and I was so happy to have him here. We didn't get to talk long because it was a late day for him. Uh-huh. And then he was on your program. If I'm not mistaken, he is on your program on Wednesdays.
Well, no. So he's on my show today, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Right now is Recovering the Constitution. He's reading the content, asking questions, and so forth. And so, yes, he's kind of like that sounding board, or he's you asking the questions. Yeah. The bottom line, he's contributing into the content. And I have other people that, step up and contribute from Georgia, Florida, and, all over. So anyway.
And I'm going to hope that you would be kind enough, sir. I think for myself in my last few years of life, and that's the way I'm looking at this, I didn't do enough, I feel, for not only my siblings, for my family, for my friends, but I didn't do enough for my country. Even though I served in the Navy, I didn't do enough. And I think right now what we need to do here in America is get back to the fundamental basics of the Constitution. And like you say, you don't pick one and disregard the others. You don't say, oh, I'm all about the Second Amendment or I'm all about the First or what have you.
Right.
You've got to take it all in. And personally, I have a show coming up with Margaret Ida Hubbard on Wednesday. Normally it would be a Vincent's Voices show.
I'm so booked. I'm not
I
going to be
know.
able to
Oh
come
no,
back
I know.
tomorrow. And
But
I've
I
got
would
to
hope,
go. I'm already a minute late, and I hate to be rude to my next people. So I got to get ready because it's going to take me some time to get ready for this contractor coming in. God bless you. We'll be in touch, and I am here to help, and I'm not from the government.
Ronald Reagan. God bless you, sir. Thank you.
You betcha. Thank you so much. Bye now.
Bye-bye, sir. Really, folks, it's like I was explaining it to GR. I feel like right now this is like something we're seeing across the nation. And we're not stupid people. We know what's going on. We know that we have politicians that are in office that are self-serving. We know that they are, of course, maybe slaves to a master, a higher corporation. In this case, maybe towards Bill Gates or like our Joe Biden. You know, he's a slave to China. That's why China's whipping up all the land we have. And I could go on forever, but I don't want to talk about specific news as such. What I just want to say is this. I'm going to be presenting, I'm hoping, through this, through the next couple of months, next couple of weeks, at various time slots, also haphazardly, as these people afford us this time. I believe, I mean, I'm hoping that you got something out of GR. And if you haven't, and you need to maybe review this podcast, I know I'm definitely going to have to do it to take my own personal notes. Do it, learn it, pass it, share it. Let other people know that the only way we can take back our country, our liberties, our freedoms, take back what we believe and value to be the United States of America is to be more involved with, again, the Constitution. I've been blessed with having some of the most wonderful people in my life right now. I thought the opening of the program, if you got to see it, I'm almost tempted to say, hey, let's do it one more time real quick because it is a debut. And just in the opening alone, working with the Godfather, Don Corleone, you know, I have to tell you, it was a collaboration. We actually had to work. Actually, we asked questions of other people. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? What was your opinion of? And that's how we came to where it's at. And it still has to be tweaked. But I assure you, our goal right now, my goal, our goal, I think, as a network, is to have a lot of different programs that will touch on a lot of different spices of life, as one might say. But I've got to tell you, this is the one for myself. I've got to watch it grow. I've got to watch it. I've got to watch this grow. I will have other radio personalities come on. It might be interesting to keep it just like this. They're on the radio. They don't do podcasts. They don't want to be seen for whatever reason. And that's a good thing. They're used to that. They're more comfortable there. And GR, I definitely know was very, very comfortable where he was at. And I appreciated him being there. But I want you to know, folks, on the Common Denominator Network, the one thing that we want to show at least is that we have more in common than we don't, that we can find common ground and not be struggling, not be battling, not be fighting, not be arguing, not be, you know, in friction. Yes, it sounds like I'm being a whiner talking about the HOA, but no, I'm not. I'm very ticked off that they stole money from me. They are liars. They are thieves. HOAs are not good across the board. And all I can say is I may be a loud, brash, big mouth, which at times I can be, most times. And if you don't like me, I don't care. I've got too many people that I value that do. And so you have to stand up for what you believe in. Each and every one of us has that fortitude within ourselves to have that faith and that belief that we can say, we're tired of being kicked around. We're tired of being stopped. We're tired of being suppressed. So that's why this program, I'm hoping, is going to be taking off, that everyone that I have for a guest will just, whatever it is that their passion, their feeling, their what they feel as though you need to know, it's going to be about them. And again, I don't mind wearing that dunce's cap. I really don't, because that's the only way that we're going to learn, is from mistakes, i.e., such as myself making, even on this program. Thank you for allowing me to make those mistakes, for hearing those mistakes, and again, for hopefully learning from, i.e., this wonderful host of the Red State Radio. That again is Red State Radio out of Spokane, Washington. You can catch him, I believe, Friday nights at 6 o'clock was when I heard him the last week. I wanted to know a little bit about him. He's a remarkable man. He really is. G.R. Mobley, to me, is a remarkable man. And there are many men like him and women out there like him. All you have to do is be exposed to him. And if I have my way, I'm going to expose myself and them to you. Voraciously, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so very much. Thank you, Paramystic. Thank you, Just Truck It. Thank you, Logbook. Thank you. Okay, Vincent's voice. Thank you, actually, seriously, for being here with your constitutional rights and consequences. We're seeing the consequences and living through them. Let's turn around, folks. Take care.